Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Jim Kleiber show. Today is Wednesday, September 9th, 2020, 1:01 p.m. here in the Eastern Daylight's Time. Daylight's Time? Daylight Savings Time? I don't know how people pronounce that. Anyways, today I'm really excited to talk about a topic that kept me up a little bit last night. And yeah, it's a topic about efficiency and the downsides of efficiency, the downsides of productivity, the downsides of minimalism and things like this. So when we talk about efficiency, sorry, I noticed the camera was near the microphone was doing some funny things. When we talk about efficiency, I think about how much of my life has been designed around efficiency, how I almost constantly strive to make things more efficient. And I couldn't sleep so well last night because I was thinking of examples, and wow, so many examples came to my mind, so many stories about times in my life where I found a system as is and tried to make it more efficient, tried to reduce the amount of friction, tried to reduce the amount of time, the amount of effort, the amount of money, the amount of people, the amount of things required to get something done. And I thought about how I do this so frequently when it comes to work. For example, I will, even when I'm looking at running these podcasts, I will try to find the most efficient way for me to record a podcast and for it to get uploaded and put onto a website and distributed to everyone as efficiently as possible, with the least amount of work from me, with the least amount of cost, with the least amount of time spent, etc., etc. And even if I get it to a good point, like right now, for example, if I record a podcast, if I record it on my phone, I can upload it to a service called Auphonic, Auphonic, and Auphonic will do the audio leveling automatically for me, and then it will export it to different storage sites. So I can export it to Dropbox, and I can export it to my own server or to the web host that I'm using. I can upload it to a podcasting host. And then, since I run my site using WordPress, I can use WordPress, and there's an Auphonic importer. I can import it there, which will automatically create a post, and then I can make the post public, and once I publish the post, boom, now it's on the podcast, and it can spread out to anyone that's listening on a podcast player. What? And so it's quite efficient, but I still try to make it more and more efficient. Okay, well, how could I reduce the time, reduce the things that I have to do to publish the post? How could I make it so that every post is the way that I want it to be without having to change it each time? Okay, how could I also make it so that the podcasts automatically refresh? Oh, how could I also do this? How could I also do that? And so I can drive myself so much to make it more and more efficient, and without realizing that there are downsides to efficiency. And I think I learned this best earlier this year when we went into the pandemic, and something that happened here in the US, which shocked many of us and probably made many people around the world either roll their eyes at the US or feel confused by why this was such a big deal. But we had a toilet paper shortage. If you'd go to the grocery store, the supermarket, or convenience store, there wasn't a lot of grocery or toilet paper to buy. And being a country obsessed with toilet paper, I would argue that the vast majority of people in the US use toilet paper over using water when going to the toilet. And this was a big challenge. And a lot of people were afraid. Some people were hoarding it. And there was a lot of claims that we didn't have so much because people were hoarding it and people were stealing it from everyone else. And then I read this one article that said, no, that wasn't the case at all. I mean, maybe you had a few people that were out there hoarding, but overall, not really. The problem was that toilet paper is divided into two sectors in the US. You have residential toilet paper, but you also have commercial toilet paper. And so commercial toilet paper is the stuff that you find at the shopping malls, what you find at offices, what you find at airports, what you find at basically commercial entities, restaurants, things like this. Well, what happened when the pandemic started in the US is that these places shut down. So people weren't going to the office, people weren't going to the store, people weren't going to the restaurants. We were all just staying home. Not all, but most of us. And so instead of using the bathroom at work, we were using the bathroom at home. And what the people said is that it switched the demand. The demand used to be maybe, let's just say it was 50-50 between commercial and residential. But then now it was like 5 for commercial and 95 for residential. And the problem was that toilet paper in general is a very low margin business, meaning, pun strongly intended, but they have paper thin margins. And I was looking forward to using that pun, but to be able to make any profit, they become highly, highly efficient industries. So they're operating at such small profits that they have to try to reduce as much cost as possible in the process. And so what they were saying was, because the commercial toilet paper industry became so efficient at production, distribution, et cetera, it was really hard to change. It became so focused on doing that one specific thing that to adapt it to the change in environment was too difficult. It would have cost too much money, it would have taken too much time, and would not have been very profitable. And I look at that as an analogy, or kind of as a story of why efficiency can have downsides. One of the main downsides of efficiency is this inability to adapt. So if something becomes so highly efficient, it means it works so well in one particular environment. It has reduced all of the friction in the environment and has made it so that everything is running completely smoothly. But the problem is, if something changes in the environment, that system can't adapt very well. It's the idea of having like even a garden at home and trying to make my garden as efficient as absolutely possible. I'm going to focus on this garden. I'm going to put everything into it. I'm going to build these structures. I'm going to have all this stuff. I'm going to have all this. Boom. It's going to be so efficient because I want to have the maximum production for the minimal amount of water input, sun input, fertilizer input, time input, etc. But if a tornado comes along and rips the garden out, I'm in trouble. I put so much time and effort into making this highly efficient that to start another one could be really difficult. Or maybe it's not something as big as a tornado coming through. Maybe it's that to be so highly efficient, I rely on a specific type of fertilizer and a specific type of sprinkler system or irrigation system. And maybe they stop producing the fertilizer, the irrigation system. Or maybe there's a problem with the fertilizer and they no longer import it, right? Maybe we get into a trade war with some country, and that's the only place in the world that has this particular type of fertilizer, and we no longer have it anymore here for the house. So it could really screw up the whole system. And I've seen that in my life a lot, where I've tried to reduce the number of things that I own. Okay, here's one story from a couple of years ago. I built a laptop stand out of cardboard that I wanted to use while I was traveling, because I wanted something that would put the laptop at eye level, which I'm actually using it right now, to put it at eye level so that I could look straight forward and not have to bend over and hunch over to use the computer. And then I thought, okay, well, if it's up this high, then I need an external keyboard. And luckily, at the time, there was an Apple keyboard that was out that was flat, but then it had a spot for, I think it was maybe a AA battery at the end. And so it was flat, completely flat, and then the end of it had a kind of like a tube for the battery. And so if I'd set this down flat on the table, it would be raised a little bit. It would have an incline, and it was really bad for my hands. And so I said, okay, fine. So I was carrying around a notebook that I'd use to sketch notes and designs and stuff like this in. And I put the keyboard on top of the notepad, and I scooted the keyboard all the way to the top. And then that little tube fell off the end of the notepad, and then it made the keyboard flat. Perfect solution. Okay, I got that. And so I said, okay, well, I need a mouse then, because I don't want to reach up and tap on the touchpad all the time. And so I had this mouse that was this beautiful mouse from Microsoft. It was small, easy to travel with. It was symmetrical. So it wasn't like one of those mouses that have some weird, like very asymmetrical ergonomic designs. It was a very symmetrical one. And it was small, and it fit into my tiny little hand. And so I really liked this mouse. And so I had the perfect mouse. I had the keyboard all set up. I had the notebook. I had the cardboard. I had my laptop. I had my MacBook. It was from 2011 or something. Laptop. And I love the laptop and everything. And then one day I was traveling, and I had left my backpack in the trunk of a car that I rented. And I was going into a party to see some friends, and I realized I had on brown shoes and I was wearing a black belt. And so I knew I was in somewhat of a kind of I'd say sketchy, but a neighborhood where people have a tendency to break into cars and steal things. And so I quickly opened my trunk, pulled out my belt, switched belts, and then went to the party. I mean, my trunk was open for maybe 30 seconds. I go to the party for an hour and a half. I come back, and someone had smashed through the back window and opened the trunk through the back seat and stole the whole bag. So now I had this perfect setup for me. It was highly efficient. I had the laptop at the right level. The laptop was firing. The keyboard was perfect. It was flat. Ergonomically, I had the right mouse. And then stolen. All gone. All gone. Oh. So finding a laptop to replace it was hard, because they don't make a lot of the same, like Apple changed their design on the their laptop keyboard and the ports and many different things. So their newer laptops weren't like the ones before. And so I had to scour the web to find one from before. The keyboard, they didn't make the keyboard anymore. They changed the keyboard where it doesn't have the little tube at the end. It has kind of a slight incline. And so that was hard. And the mouse doesn't exist at all. Okay, so it doesn't exist new at all. They got rid of that design. And so it's possible to buy online for maybe 3 or 4 times the original price. And so this highly efficient system just completely collapsed. And then for the next couple of years, I used the laptop not on the stand. I forgot about the stand. I just said, okay, whatever. I just have to use the laptop like I did. And so systems like this can fall apart really quickly, even if the whole laptop, even if the whole thing didn't get stolen, even if they just took the mouse. Well, now I don't have a mouse. And maybe there's plenty of mice, and you can say that, oh yeah, what are you talking about? Just get any mouse will work. No, the idea was that I found the most efficient one, the one that I could use for a very long time. It felt very comfortable in my hand, whereas the other ones didn't. And yeah, like, so there's the ability to adapt to changing environments, but there's also this ability of like somebody, I was reading an article last night. I think it was in the Harvard Business Review, and it was talking about the opposite of efficiency being resilience. And this concept, okay, if I lose that one thing, the whole thing falls apart. There's a certain fragility into being highly efficient. If one part of the system breaks, it could really break the rest of the system. So this wasn't just with the laptop. Okay, let's tell another story. Another story was when I was living in Tanzania. At one point, our house got broken into, and they stole some things, and they stole my sandals. So I had these nice sandals that I had bought when I was in the U.S., and they were size 12 or something. They'd fit my feet, and really nice kind of leather sandals, super comfortable. Oh, or was it the Chaco sandals? Regardless, they were really nice sandals that fit my feet, and I was having some troubles with my feet, like some pains in my feet, and so they were perfect. They really helped, and they were like the only source of respite that like one of the few sources of respite that I had when I was living there. While I loved my time in Tanzania, it was hot. I lived in a house that didn't have air conditioning. I got malaria a few times. It was humid. There were many people in the house. I was killing mosquitoes all the time. It was quite stressful in many ways. And so to have those shoes, they were the source of comfort for me. And the problem was I couldn't find other shoes in Tanzania that really fit. Having a size 12, US size 12 shoe or foot is not very common in East Africa, or at least from what I found. The only place I could really find shoes was at the used shoe store selling shoes that were imported from the US. And I'd pay, I don't know, maybe the same price as I would in the US for the shoes. And so having those sandals was very important to me because that was the way I got around. And so when they were gone, I was stuck. I was so frustrated. I was so demoralized in a way because my system of being I had built that system around those shoes. Another shoe story from East Africa. Okay, so recently in February, I went there for a wedding of my roommate from the time when I had lived in Tanzania. And it was the day of the wedding we were going to go. And mind you, when I used to travel to Tanzania, I would go and I was living there and I'd bring a huge suitcase, maybe 2 suitcases. But because in the last couple of years as I've traveled, I've wanted to be light on my feet and don't want to be bogged down with trying to trudge through new cities and maybe in foreign languages carrying very large suitcases on buses and stuff like this and through downtowns. One, for it not being too safe, because I'm not very light on my feet with those things. But 2, just the burden of having to pack and carry all that stuff. And so, when I was traveling in February, I just had a backpack. And so I went with a backpack and a little side bag. It's a little bag that you can get any grocery store or supermarket. You kind of like a quite small bag. And I was carrying a suit. And I was carrying a suit because I was going to this wedding. And so I was carrying a suit, but I was also carrying dress shoes that I had from here in the US. Nice black dress shoes. And again, the black dress shoes were size 12. And so it's the day of the wedding, and we're walking around in the morning. And one of the locals I was walking with says, like, what happened to your shoe? And I said, what are you talking about? And she points to the back of my shoe, and the heel had started to crumble. Now, it was a shoe that was designed to be very lightweight because I wanted lightweight shoes so I could travel. It was also a shoe that was supposed to be ergonomic for me, a little wider and stuff like this. And the base of the shoe, the heel of the shoe, was made of a very soft foam. Well, what I think happened was, walking through the streets of Kampala, Uganda, I may have stepped on a rock or something that tore the heel a little bit. And in tearing the heel a little bit, as I kept walking, the heel started to deteriorate. The soft foam started to rip apart. And basically within, I'd say 30 minutes or so, the heel fell off. Like it deteriorated down. So now I have one shoe completely fine, the other shoe where the heel is kind of deteriorated. So I'm a little lopsided as I stand and I walk, and it's really uncomfortable, not good for my feet, and more than anything, very noticeable. Very noticeable to the people in Uganda. And so luckily we went to a shoe store, and luckily they had a size that fit my large and kind of tender feet, my somewhat tender feet. Luckily found a pair of shoes that would work. But if we didn't, what? What would I have done? How would I have gone to this wedding? I only brought one pair of dress shoes with me. I had one pair of dress shoes, and I think one pair of casual shoes, and maybe a pair of running shoes. But the running shoes are these 5-toed, they're called Vibram 5-finger toes, toe shoes. And I cannot wear those at the wedding. The other ones were like a bright tan, like a bright brown shoe. I couldn't wear those to the wedding. So it's the problem with being so efficient and so minimalist sometimes is that if something happens to one of those key inputs, one of those key components, the whole system can break down. And I think this happens so much in my life, and I can imagine it happens to many of you as well, where at times you try to make something more and more efficient, and then it becomes really, really, really dependent on the environment not changing, or the inputs not breaking or disappearing or being stolen or being obsolete, things like this. I talk about this because I think my drive for creating efficiency in terms of products, I don't have many shirts. So as I've gained a little bit of weight, not too many shirts fit anymore. So do I go out and buy lots of shirts? But if I'm trying to be minimalist, I don't want to have a lot of shirts. Okay, so I should lose the weight so the shirts fit. Oh, but now I'm doing a TV show or a podcast. Oh, so people are going to see the shirts. I'm wearing the same shirts over and over again. Now, if I have lots of shirts, then, if one of the shirts is dirty, then I'm fine. I can wear another shirt. But if I only have a few, then I have to be very careful to make sure that I wash them all at the same time so that I always have a shirt. You know what I mean? So I've seen in myself that as I've driven myself more and more towards trying to make solutions efficient, I almost get obsessed with making it efficient instead of putting it out there to the world. I am somewhat afraid to put things out to the world that haven't been optimized. And the challenge with that is that the more that I optimize something, the less flexible it becomes, the less adaptable it becomes. And if it doesn't work for the audience, then, or if I don't like it, it doesn't work for me, then I've already put all this time and energy and money into optimizing it that it's hard to change. And so a lot of times I just put it to the side. And so, maybe this is a conversation that relates to the idea that some of us get so focused on building things and optimizing things that we don't put it out in the world and tell people about it. And when we don't tell people about it, they don't know it exists. And it may be such an optimal solution, but if people don't know it exists, they can't use it. And if it's so optimal, by the time I release it to other people, if they want it to change or I want it to change, I may have a lot of resistance to changing it, or the system itself may have a lot of resistance to change because it has been so finely tuned. Yeah, it's so for example, if I'm doing all these shows and I'm building up, as I have been, building up this library on YouTube of all these shows, but maybe the audience isn't on YouTube, maybe the audience is on Facebook. And so if I keep optimizing it on YouTube and try to like make sure that everything is perfect on YouTube, that people are doing this on YouTube and doing that, if I try to optimize the comment section on YouTube, if I try to optimize my YouTube channel, the page, and all this stuff, but the people who want to watch this stuff are on Facebook, I've just spent a lot of time optimizing YouTube, which may discourage me from switching to Facebook, may make it more difficult to switch to Facebook if I've already invested all these resources into optimizing YouTube or Twitter or whatever it may be. It's this idea that like as we optimize, as we make something more efficient, we almost suck the life out of it. we remove play. There's not a lot of play left when we're making something so efficient. You can't experiment and try something new, because experimentation by itself is inefficient. It causes failures. It can lead to quote unquote wasted resources, but it can also lead to discoveries. And so, yeah, how much time do you spend on trying to make something efficient? Maybe you're on the opposite side. Maybe you're so focused on making things adaptable and being resilient that you're the person who, when you travel, you have 2 or 3 or 4 of everything. You know, they talk about, I think it was with Navy SEALs or other special operation forces, that they build redundancy into what they pack. So they have maybe 2 or 3 of the essential items that they need to have, just in case one breaks or malfunctions or disappears or gets lost and stuff like that. So maybe you're on the opposite side. Maybe you're building in too much redundancy, too much resilience, too much adaptability, and not making things more efficient and more optimized. I think I find myself more on the side of nowadays making things more efficient and more optimized, trying to reduce the time and the inputs that it takes to do something, and then getting stuck because now I've built this system and am afraid to tell people about it, because then if they want it to change, it's too late. It's that feeling of, I already put many hours into building it this way and I've optimized it, and you want it to change? No. So I don't want to tell people, because then if I tell these people, then they may ask me to change it. I may want to change it, and then I may face this internal conflict of, but I don't really want to change it because I've already spent all this time optimizing it. So I'm going to end the conversation at this point, because I think this is just a good starting conversation. I would love to, if somebody wants to join the show and talk about this, or just talk about this myself again another time. But I think we can become obsessed with optimizing things and making things more efficient and productive. This is including systems, but also ourselves, trying to be much more productive and more efficient. That is the quote unquote capitalist way to do things. And I think that there can be a lot of downsides to this that we don't notice, that I'm starting to notice some of them. And there is one quote that I wish I could quote the author on, but I'll put it out there, and hopefully in the show notes or something I could find the author who said it. But there is a quote that I read before. There's the famous quote that says, the opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. And that's by Elie Wiesel. But there is I'm pretty sure it's by Elie Wiesel. And then there's another take on that where the guy says the opposite of love is not hate, it is efficiency. And this could be a topic for a whole different conversation on how trying to force our relationships, trying to force efficiency in our lives can really hinder the connection we feel to other people. We want people to move faster, to take less time, which is the same thing, move faster, take less time. But it can really hurt a lot of people when we focus too much on efficiency, myself included. So on that note, hopefully this was not as efficient as I would have liked it to be. I like to run very short shows. I want to do a 2-minute, 5-minute talk and then be done because I want it to be efficient. I don't want to, quote unquote, waste your time listening to this. But what I've realized is that sometimes we like listening to things because they're inefficient, because because we enjoy it. We enjoy the conversation. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Sometimes we just like hearing someone's voice or seeing someone's face or just being near someone. And in those times, we actually don't want it to be efficient. We want it to be inefficient. We want it to take time. We want it to last. We want it to go here and go there and spin around in circles and really ebb and flow with what's happening in the environment and what's happening with us. So, yeah. Thank you all for listening to this. I hope that the microphone didn't cut out. I see there's a lot of red dots happening on it, so I hope that this worked properly. If not, then I'm going to be somewhat annoyed, to say the least. All right. Bye, y'all.